welcome to this week's Hocus Focus. I'm Sara Mondaini.
And I'm Thomas Sheridan.
And thanks for joining us again this Sunday. And thanks for all your comments and interaction last week. There was some great posts about the number 7 in the comments. And it was also great to read your experiences and stories with the Phantom ladies around the world. So thank you very much for that. And as the veil between the worlds grows thin, we find ourselves at the heart of the season of magic and ancient traditions, Samhain, and it's that time for reflection and connection and transformation, and it marks the end of the harvest season and the beginning of the dark, introspective half of the year. And it's a time when we honour our ancestors and commune with the spirits and celebrate the cycle of life, death and rebirth. One of the most sacred aspects of Samhain in paganism is the remembrance of those who came before us, and we light candles and leave offerings and set a place at our table for beloved ancestors. And it's a time to hear their wisdom, seek the guidance and express gratitude for the legacy that they've passed down to us. So whatever you're doing for the new season, we wish you a very happy Samhain. And Thomas, happy Samhain to you. And how was your trip to Glastonbury and the AV13?
Shona Samhain to you, Sarah. Before I get to that, let's talk about Samhain a little more. There is a contention regarding the actual date in October, and this has a lot to do with the conflicts between the Julian and Gregorian calendar and the fact that our ancestors, our pre-Christian ancestors, worked with a 13-month lunar calendar, and the Christians work with a 12-month solar calendar. So you get a lot of smart arses go, oh, it's the wrong date. It's really a Christian holiday you're celebrating. Well, in a way, they're kind of true because they've coupled it very close to All Saints' Day or All Hallows' Day, and they renamed it All Hallows' Eve in like non-Catholic Christian countries. It doesn't matter. I always go by the lunar cycle anyway. So right now, I think we're in a waxing gibbous moon at the moment, coming close to a full moon. So I always go by the lunar cycle. So it's almost bang in where it should be at the moment. We'll probably have a Halloween full moon around that traditional period, or whatever we call the established date. So if anyone tries to get pedantic about it and tells you you're celebrating on a Christian date or the wrong date, say, I celebrate it around according to the lunar cycle that happens at that point. And you'll find that nearly every year it pops in just around the right date or an agreeable date. So don't get hung up on the 31st thing. Every chance in the world, their ancestors celebrated a festival rather than a single day. They like festivals in the pagan world. So I had a fantastic time at AV13 in Milton Keynes, not Glastonbury. And it was lovely. All the old gang were all there. Everybody was there. Everybody came back, and it was just so much love and kindness and a lot of fun too. And it was beautiful tribute to Ian. I think that a lot of people came to just say thank you to Ian. And we got a lovely photograph of all the speakers on their big picture of him at the end. And it was wonderful. A great location too. I know Milton Keynes is a bit, it's like being in New Jersey or something. It's all very American looking, being a new town. But the hotel was a fabulous venue. It had a fantastic ballroom, which was packed out. I did my presentation went down very well. I was in a really good mood, so I was cracking lots of jokes and stuff, and it was great. And it's going to happen again. So it felt like a very healing thing, not only because of Ian, but also because of we're back to normal conferences now since the whole COVID thing.
Yeah, I may try and come down to the next one next year. May try and get down there.
Yeah.
See that. Is there another one due for the same time next year, or
there's all kinds of talk, but I'm holding you to one, and I'm holding Catherine because I've got something planned for you, so don't make any plans.
Okay. I'm interested to hear about that. Okay.
Things are being done behind the scene by my white ass, and you better just wait, and I'll sort it all out.
Okay, I am in your safe hands. Anyway, I have polished my voice for tonight's first monologue. Topic. And tonight's topic is about a certain building that has become synonymous with a particular district in the Los Angeles area called Skid Row. The Cecil Hotel, located in downtown Los Angeles, has a dark and infamous history going back nearly a century now, and it's a place full of mystery, intrigue, and tragedy, which has earned it a reputation as one of the most haunted and unsettling hotels in the world. Now, the hotel opened its doors in December 1924 during a booming period in Los Angeles, and it attracted lots of business travelers and tourists. But it didn't take long for the Cecil Hotel to gain a darker reputation. And over the years, it became associated with numerous suicides, murders, and other gruesome events that have left a permanent stain on its history. One of the earliest incidents happened in 1931 when a guest by the name of W.K. Norton died in his room after ingesting poison capsules. However, this was just the beginning of a long series of mysterious deaths and suicides that seem to haunt the hotel. And I've got a list here of other reported incidents in chronological order just to quickly go through with you. And it started in 1927 with a man named Percy Ormond Cook. And he was the first registered death at the hotel, and he was 52 years old. And in January of 1927, he took his own life in the hotel after falling out with his wife and child. And then in 1931, we've got W.K. Norton. 4 years later, he died, and a man called James Willis checked in, and a week later, W.K. Norton was found dead in his room, and he was identified as being 46 years old. And he was also known as James Willis. In 1932, in September of 1932, a member of the cleaning staff named Benjamin Dodick was 25 years old, and he had taken his own life after cleaning one of the rooms. In July of 1934, an Army Medical Corps Sergeant, Louis D. Borden, ended his life at the Cecil Hotel, and it's thought that he was struggling with bad health and wanted to die. He was aged 53. In 1937, Grace E. Magro fell from the hotel's 9th-story window. Though she initially survived, after her fall was broken by telephone wires, she later died in hospital. In 1938, Roy Thompson, who had been a Cecil resident for a number of weeks, jumped from the top floor and was found on the neighbouring building. In 1939, Erwin C. Neblett was a 39-year-old Navy officer who mysteriously died in his room. In 1940, in January, a teacher by the name of Dorothy Sager was staying at the Cecil Hotel. She also mysteriously died in the hotel room. In 1944, 19-year-old Dorothy Jean Purcell and her boyfriend, 38-year-old Ben Levine, were staying at the hotel, and it was reported that Ben had no idea his then-girlfriend was pregnant. She went into labour and didn't want to wake her boyfriend, who was sleeping, so she went to the communal bathroom to give birth, where she believed that the child was stillborn and threw it out of the window, and was later determined to be mentally confused, and she was found not guilty of murder by reason of insanity. Going on, in 1947, a man called Robert Smith died after jumping from the 7th floor window, aged 35. In 1954, Margaret Brown checked into the hotel. A week later, she died after jumping again from the 7th floor window. She was 55 years old. In 1962, Julia Frances Moore, aged 50, jumped from the window of her 8th floor bedroom. In 1962, Pauline Otten, a young woman, had been fighting with her husband Dewey on the 9th floor, and she jumped out of the window to teach the guy a lesson. And she landed on a pedestrian called George Giannini, and they were both instantly killed. In 1964, Goldie Osgood lived at the Cecil Hotel, and her nickname was Pigeon Goldie, as she would regularly come out and feed the local pigeons, and she was a very well-known character in the area. One day, someone came into her room, attacked her in broad daylight, where she was sexually assaulted and killed. In 1975, an unidentified woman who was thought to be around the age of 23 jumped from the 12th floor window. She had registered at the hotel on December the 16th under the assumed name Lisa Lowell, but her real identity is still unknown. Serial killer Richard Ramirez lived at the Cecil Hotel whilst he committed his crimes in the 80s, and I'll talk more about that later. In 1992, the body of an unidentified man was found at the Cecil Hotel. He was an African-American man found in the alley behind the hotel. Police say he'd either fallen, jumped, or been pushed from the hotel's 15th floor. And then from 2007 to 2017, the hotel manager said that there were at least 80 deaths at the Cecil Hotel. And during her time there was the death of Elisa Lam, the 21-year-old Canadian student who'd been a guest at the hotel and went missing on February the 1st, which I'll talk a little bit more about later on. So as you can see, it's got quite a macabre history. And as I'm saying there, perhaps the most infamous chapter at the hotel's history is the case of Elisa Lam, where in 2013, the young Canadian tourist was actually found dead in the hotel's rooftop water tank, while the hotel guests went about their business and using the water unknowingly. And the discovery of her body shocked the world, and the eerie surveillance footage of her behaving strangely in the hotel's elevator shortly before her disappearance only added to the mystery surrounding her death. And to this day, the circumstances of Elisa Lam's death remain a subject of speculation and conspiracy theories. The Cecil Hotel and the disappearance of Elisa Lam were also the basis for a full season of American Horror Story based on a downtown LA hotel in the modern day. The Cecil Hotel also harboured some notorious residents, including Richard Ramirez, the infamous Night Stalker serial killer. And he lived at the hotel during his killing spree, and it was rumoured that he disposed of the evidence related to his crimes in the hotel's dumpsters, and he was often seen naked or in blood-stained clothing down the hotel side alleys and climbing the stairwell to his 14th floor room, where nobody batted an eyelid because it wasn't unusual behaviour for the area, and it really was that kind of place. Several years after serial killer Ramirez checked out, another killer checked in. In 1991, Austrian author Jack Unterweger booked a room claiming he was a journalist researching Los Angeles' red light districts, and he even went out with the police to watch them work. But during his 5-week stay, he strangled 3 prostitutes with their own bra straps and dumped their bodies nearby. And throughout its history, the Cecil Hotel has been plagued by squalor, crime, and poverty in the surrounding neighbourhood, which only added to its bleak reputation. Its proximity to the infamous Skid Row, a district known for its high concentration of homeless individuals, further intensified the sense of despair and danger associated with the hotel. Skid Row and its surrounding blocks, I think, are the quintessential example of a deep town, and Thomas and I cover the concept of the deep town in our upcoming book, Hocus, Merging Folklore and Forteana. So let me explain briefly what I mean by that. Well, Skid Row is a place where suffering and adversity have accumulated over the years, which leads to the concept that dark forces and individuals are drawn to such an area to feed on the misery that permeates it. One building in particular that could be viewed as a tragic victim of all this accumulated anguish is the Cecil Hotel. The numerous deaths and murders that occurred within it seem to contribute to a kind of psychic imprint upon the area's geomagnetic structure, deepening its aura of darkness and making it an ideal location for supernatural entities such as demons or jinn to linger and potentially influence individuals who are particularly vulnerable or lacking the psychic defenses to withstand such influences. During certain guests' stay at the Cecil Hotel, it's often seemed as though something had an inexplicable influence on those who were vulnerable, prompting them to exhibit behaviours far removed from their usual selves. Instances of individuals tragically leaping to their deaths or becoming unexpectedly violent were not uncommon. And it's been suggested that Elisa Lam, who had struggled with mental health issues, might have been particularly susceptible to such influences. Some believe that individuals fighting with mental health challenges were the ones most easily swayed by these mysterious forces, which ultimately led them to display unusual and erratic behaviour, akin to a form of possession. And over the years, the Cecil Hotel has gone through multiple ownership changes and renovations in an attempt to rebrand itself, but its dark cloud has proven very difficult to shake. In 2011, it was rebranded as Stay on Main in an effort to distance itself from its dark past. And after being bought in 2007, the Cecil Hotel / Stay on Main became half long-time stay for low-income, low-credit tenants and half hotel, hostel, budget lodgings for tourists, with many of the tourists who came to visit this Stay on Main not knowing that they were staying, in fact, at the Cecil Hotel. The bottom 2 floors of the Cecil were for long-term residents. The Stay on Main Youth Hostel was on floors 4 to 6 and floor 7, and above that were the Cecil Hotel rooms. And there was even a separate hotel entrance and lobby for residents of the Stay on Main. And in 2017, the hotel underwent yet another transformation when it was announced that the building would be closed as a hotel and redeveloped into a combination of hotel rooms and low-income housing. And the Cecil Hotel's dark history has been a fascination for true crime enthusiasts, paranormal investigators, and storytellers. And many historians and people who've stayed there long-term during its dark past will tell you the hotel was a scandalous hotel where pretty much anything goes, and how many of the residents would stay away from the top floors because that was where people were killed after being lured up there to so-called parties. They would then be beaten and robbed and thrown out of the top floor windows. And the top floors, it would seem, was where people would check in but would never check out. And my thoughts on it are that with places like the Cecil Hotel, that you're entering something that is a possible gateway to other realms and tapping into a stream of energy which seems to be magnified by the hotel's darkness and the undercurrent of the nearby Skid Row. And I think that's also further amplified by the serial killers Richard Ramirez and Jack Unterweger. And I think it's something ingrained into the location there, maybe to do with the ground it's built upon. It could have been some kind of sacred ground long before the settlers arrived here and built and desecrated so many of the native places. And I also think that certain areas in Los Angeles really do represent the shadowy side of the American dream. These places seem to be driven by the pursuit of excess greed and the willingness to make self-sacrifices in the chase for a taste of fame and glamour. And Hollywood in particular, I think, is another dark district hiding beneath the dazzling veneer it presents to the world. And I think that within this glamour, unseen forces or entities lurk there, feeding off the desperation and vulnerability of those who've been drawn to the city's homeless population, all happening in plain sight, hidden behind the glittering facade. And most people who were drawn to the Cecil Hotel were there because it was an affordable option to get them closer to the Hollywood dream. And Thomas, what do you think about the Cecil Hotel?
I was going to call what you said a synopsis, but it's not. It was an epic intro. I'm going to give you a standing ovation for that. Yes, well done. You captured those kinds of places perfectly. Those hotels were never swanky hotels. They were built at a time in America where there was lots of moving around and by people working and all kinds of things. And these people generally traveled by the old railroads, the big railroad systems that existed at the time they were built. So they were downtown near the big train stations. Now Manhattan was full of them. I worked around on 8th Avenue in Manhattan, and there was 4 or 5 of Cecil Hotel type buildings within a couple of blocks, and they were just like that. There was discount touristy places on the bottom, and upstairs the long-term, what they call welfare hotels, people on welfare. And that was started out for the right reason. It was to help people after World War II or came back from war. And there were a lot of these were men who were on their own. They were still quite young, and they got jobs in the post office and things like that. And there was a way for them to continue living in the city without having to, it was just an easy way for them to live, or people who had been injured in the war, that kind of thing. The Cecil Hotel was a classic example of one of them. Very nice building now, never a swanky hotel, but a very attractive, well-made type of that Beaux Arts type American architecture. And like I said, deep down, that thing had been around so long now. It's 100 years old, like most of those kind of hotels are. But it's just, and so many people have stayed and lived in them. It's just like a town. There are cities in America that are not 100 years old. So are towns, like. And so it's for all intents and purposes, that is a town, a city, in one location, especially when it becomes insular and itself, with residents there in the margins of society. That kind of hauntological thing happens. My first ever memory of the Cecil Hotel is a weird one. With millions and millions of people heard about the Cecil Hotel, but they didn't notice it. The music video by U2 for Where the Streets Have No Name is filmed on top of a liquor store in downtown LA. And as Ed starts playing the guitar, you can see the big, huge black and white sign behind him saying what Americans call it Cecil Hotel. So, and that was like, so that album came out on 85. So a lot of people had seen that. It's weird how it even appeared in a video like that. When you go back and watch that YouTube video now, it's strange the way that sign appears in the background. There's an interesting kind of hauntological mysticism thing about it now, looking back on the history of that place. And I don't know anything about downtown LA, but I do know certain parts of it are absolutely atrocious. They're absolute slums. And that Skid Row thing, like you think of all those, and I think that theory of the Skid Row being kind of like the host for providing entities for the Cecil Hotel, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think these people, a lot more mentally ill, schizophrenics, there's tremendous drug casualties, and people down and out and on their bottom, lower, meth heads. And these are perfect walk-in vessels for these entities. And all these people have to do then is to get off the streets and get into the Cecil Hotel. And then you have like the whole hotel as a nest of entities. Now, they've also been trying to gentrify that part of Los Angeles in recent times. And they built a few streets away, they built some very nice apartment buildings. And on that documentary that you referred to earlier on, which had a very strange, I'd have to call it performance, but I don't know what it was, by the actual real hotel manager lady, who was a very peculiar individual. And she seemed like she had this strange, almost love affair with the building that was really bizarre. But her whole mannerism and everything was very peculiar, especially when she was talking about the poor Elisa Lam horror story. And that documentary went through all kinds of psychiatric gymnastics to try and say, oh, she was depressed and everything like that. It makes no sense how she died, even crawling up on the roof of the building and everything, even if she was that depressed, the behavior, it makes no sense. And the hotel, then again, like stay on Main, people were from like this part of the world were never been to LA, thought they were staying in some kind of glamorous hotel in Los Angeles, and they had no idea that LA was a lot of the area is just a dump. It's like a real crime-ridden, dangerous dump. So it has all these conflicting energies coming in together in the hotel, and the hotel becomes almost like an amplifier of these forces and entities. But the first time it really came onto my radar was that famous video of Elisa Lam in the elevator, which is still incredibly disturbing now that you look at it, just as what it is. And I bet there's other Cecil hotels that are all over the world, but particularly in America, those kind of buildings and those kind of massive that we don't have hotels like that in Europe or half as welfare. We just don't have that culture here. Although we're getting it now with all the hotels that are being turned over to, should we say, the doctors and engineers arriving at Dover. And we may have, and actually I'm going to make a prediction. Those of us in the UK and Ireland, we're going to have Cecil hotels of our own now, with the influx of people who have been brought in from the Middle East to stay in them in huge numbers, and nearly always men. That's not a political statement. It's not any kind of statement. I'm saying that these forces will manifest in these hotels, especially if they're shared hotel. So watch this space for Cecil hotels in the UK and Ireland, because I guarantee you they're coming.
That's very interesting. I never thought of that. Didn't think of that at all, because they'd be bringing, some of those men will inadvertently be bringing gin with them,
especially if they're, well,
depending on what their agenda is when they get here. We don't know that really, do we? But if it's not good, if they're sleeping cells, if you like, and they're waiting for instruction and they're not coming here with good intention, then who knows what they're bringing with them.
Yeah, we don't know, or if they're legit, they could be accidentally, you know. Let's not typecast any people with, you know. But look, you carry your spiritual entities with you. There were stories of Irish immigrants in the USA in the 1910s and 20s killing their babies because they thought they were changelings or not wanting their babies. So you carry those things with you wherever you go, so that they're part of the sort of psycho-spiritual makeup of a culture. And you know, we do seem to have a gin issue now since especially in the last 20 years in Europe as a whole, returning troops from the Gulf and so on, that kind of thing. And yeah, you watch this space, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And they're welfare, for all intents and purposes, they're welfare hotels, just like the Cecil is, you know, and the American hotels are. And they're also, some of them are split half and half. And some of them are, you know, so it should be interesting to see what happens. Well, not interesting, probably not the word, but it'll be insightful. And we have to do a big show on the gin at some point, because I've been thinking a lot about that phenomena in terms of Europe today and where we were going and that kind of thing. Perhaps America too. But the Cecil Hotel one, I'd be very interested in what kind of Wetiko type entity would have gathered inside them. Would it be egregoric, that it was actually manifested as an embodiment of the Cecil Hotel? Or would these people have, homeless people on the street, have been taken over by Native American entities or something similar like to that? Mexican lechuzas and stuff like that, because it is not far from Mexico. So the Cecil Hotel is kind of like a uniquely 21st century Fortean paranormal story. It's almost like when you were talking about the Deep Town, Sarah, we had to come through this whole history of folklore, ghost lore, haunting lore, all that stuff, social lore, the gin, everything else, to bring us to the point where we could even have a proper discussion about the nature of the Cecil Hotel, because we didn't probably have the correct hauntological or Fortean toolkit to talk about it in the past.
I think I'll give you an experience of my own when I've been to Los Angeles, which wasn't very nice. But I think that hotel started to have an effect on that manager from the documentary. I don't think she was a particularly disturbed individual when she went there to work.
Yeah, there. like Jack Torrance from The Shining Hotel.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he started to do a number on her. And I've looked her up recently while I was researching for this, and she's not in the hotel business anymore. Now she makes her own jewelry and sells it on Etsy or something like that. So she's completely out of the game altogether now. So I'd like to think that she might have got some of her normal character back, and it doesn't seem so normal and day to day to her anymore. That kind of business, what was going on in there. And I think many of us have encountered places or buildings where we inexplicably adopt characteristics and emotions that aren't our own, as though something takes over us, leading us to feel anger or sadness or just to act out of character. And I believe that Skid Row and the surrounding area have an effect on the certain individuals. And I think the longer you spend there, the more susceptible you become to the dark energy that seems to just permeate or saturate the place. And it's a location that appears to be full of this kind of unsettling presence. And the people it attracts are in a way like a symptom of a physical symptom of this, because you can't see the demons and the jinn that are hanging around there. So you see the symptom of it through the people that they attach themselves to. And I went to stay at Venice Beach a few years ago, in LA on the beachfront, and we went to downtown LA, and it was didn't like it really. It was a very strange place. You had to be really careful where you was wandering, because you could fall onto Skid Row by complete accident if you're not careful wandering around there. But we stayed at Venice Beach, and by day it was a real touristy beach type of place. And then it was kind of juxtaposed against a massive homeless and drug problem alongside it. And the two things on the surface seemed to get on undisturbed during the day. But after 8 p.m, you were advised not to go walking around the area. And it was true. And one evening we'd gone out for some dinner on the same stretch of beach where our hotel was. And we'd walked about 100, 200 yards down and completely lost track of the time. And when I looked up at the street, we was in the restaurant, and when I looked up at the street, it was suddenly deserted. And this silence and this thickness had just descended upon it. And it was only 8:30 in the evening. So we walked back home to the hotel, and I can only describe it as being zombie-like. It just seemed to be full of zombies and panhandlers and drug addicts hanging around. And when some of them on the street looked at you, you knew it wasn't the people, it wasn't the human that was looking at you. It was this thing inside them that had seen you. And they'd have this look on the face like they were mocking you, because whatever it was that was inside knew that you were aware of it, but no one was ever going to believe you. And after experiencing that, I actually believe to this day that there was something more than just panhandlers and drug addicts stalking around the area over the nighttime and looking for victims. So we made sure that we weren't walking the streets after 8 p.m. And just down the road on the other side of the beach was Santa Monica, where it seemed to be a much lighter and safer place for tourists. So if we wanted to go out in the evening, we'd take an Uber into Santa Monica, but we didn't walk on the streets at all in Venice Beach after 8 o'clock at night. And I honestly believe to this day that, and I'll say it sounds crazy, but I'll say it, but I believe that Los Angeles serves as a gateway to a dimension that's way different to our ordinary reality. And I think that's why it's kind of meticulously portrayed as a realm of glitz and glamour, like a deliberate allure designed to draw people towards it, like the shiny. And anything that's persistently marketed as overwhelmingly glamorous and beautiful like that, to me, inherently raises suspicion. And I think it makes us question, or we should be questioning, the intentions behind such a promotion, because we know in esoteric practices, it's not uncommon for practitioners of the dark arts to employ the art of glamour on the intended targets. And that's done with a distinct purpose to assess the susceptibility of individuals to having the will manipulated. And that's often through seduction or the seductive lures of greed and other kind of darker inclinations. So for that reason, I'm going to LA and experiencing it for myself, because I was enamored by the glamour on the TV. As you know, as you're growing up and you get there and you see it's a totally different story. And for that reason, I honestly do believe there's some very dark black magic going on there.
Now, before, we're not slagging off Los Angeles or that part of, Southern California. I'm sure lots of you live there and have an amazing time. And I also know that some dark places have also some very interesting things about them, especially such an interesting place like LA in general. It's one of the biggest cities in the world, actually. And the people who originally brought to LA in the old days, it was a paradise. They were like the Okies who had escaped the dust storm in Oklahoma, and they came to this place that was basically a paradise. It had, like, beautiful weather all year round. And then it had the oil industry and everything else. So it's had a tremendous history in a short time. And occult-wise, well, there's been books written by Satanists, ex-witches, they claim to be. One woman was called Rebecca something. She's a born-again Christian now. She actually was a doctor, but she was struck off. And she claimed that LA was a city of sacrifice and satanic covens, but you don't know how much of that is true or is all made up or whatever. But we know that Jack Parsons' Agape Lodge was in Pasadena, very close by, and that kind of thing. And he came to LA at a time. He grew up in LA at a time when it really was a kind of a paradise for many people. So, I'm sure there's lots of people who watch Hocus Pocus who lived there or grew up there and have another point to show. So we're not attacking LA or anything like that or people in it. It's just that we both had these experiences and that's how we are. And neither one of us are, greenhorn, what American call like green. I mean, we both grew up in pretty tough inner city areas, so we're not afraid of this stuff by nature. And so yes, I think it's just the Cecil or the Cecil Hotel is a gigantic repository of torment. And in that torment is entities that are attracted to feed off and create further torment. And it'll probably, unless they demolish it, which is highly unlikely, I often wondered too if there's an actual financial value in it being the Cecil Hotel, that people will actually be drawn there to do rituals or to actually try and do ghost hunting just to be there. So, I'm sure they've marketed that. I just want to say one more thing about the hotel manager. She was affected by the building. That's happened to me. Only recently, about a couple of years now, a year and a bit, out of working in a building that was very, very bad for my emotional health. It made me very grumpy and argumentative. I was always sick when I was working there. Had flus and everything. And there was no one particularly bad there. It wasn't a particularly awful place or anything. It was just that the building itself didn't like me, and it didn't want to make me happy. I used to feel my energy drained out of it when I'd go in there in the morning. And one of the best things I ever did was to leave it. And I was a much more contented person and productive person afterwards. It was one of those buildings that wasn't worth the money. So I've been there. So I'll let you wrap it up now, the Cecil Hotel. Let's hear it from anyone who has their own stories. Maybe we even had Hocus Focusers who stayed there.
Yeah. I just want to echo nothing against Los Angeles whatsoever. Aside from the bits, it's dark underbelly, it is a beautiful place. Met some beautiful people there, lovely people, friends and people in the service industry. Everywhere we went, everybody was falling over themselves, to make sure that you had a nice stay there. What I'm talking about more is that when I was there, I felt something that you can't really see. The average person isn't going to see it. I felt something behind the glitzy, glamorous facade. I suppose that's what I was trying to convey with my thoughts and feelings on Los Angeles.
Well, that was me too. When I watched that movie LA Confidential and other films that kind of explore the dark underbelly, like Mulholland Drive and that kind of thing. Yeah. So we're obviously not the only ones who feel that way about these kinds of places.
And I've experienced the same as you in certain buildings as well. Usually hotels, usually dark, danky hotels. They make me, I go in there and something comes over me, I become angry and irritable for no reason whatsoever, and I don't want to be in there, and I feel like there's something in there that doesn't want me in there, and I end up becoming a little bit accident prone. Things keep going wrong, nothing goes right, the staff don't seem to want to interact with me or anything, and I don't well, obviously there's something there that's not compatible, that doesn't want you in there. And again, it's not the staff or the area itself. It's nothing physical. It's something unseen that's very hard to put into words. You feel it more than you see it, but it's very real when you feel it.
I stayed in a hotel not too long ago in the UK. That was there was an entity in the corner it had a balcony, the hotel room, and underneath the balcony roof in the corner was a shadow being of some kind, an entity, a demon, whatever. That didn't move. It stayed there all night, and it was in the one corner. I mean, we always spoke here in Hocus Focus about how the old grannies used to really scrub the corners where the mold was. There was a belief that like bad ghosts could live there, and it was that. Now it didn't feel like it was a dangerous thing, but it was there. I was all night. I saw it, and it wasn't visible when you turned the light on, and it wasn't a shadow. And yeah, I've seen these things before. It was almost like a nested entity in the corner of a balcony in a hotel. So that could be anything, it could be an entity that feeds off the emotions in that hotel, whether they be sexual or criminal or even, people suffering from depression, like traveling salesmen and stuff, that kind of thing. But I think hotels in general are nest of these things. Just that the Cecil Hotel is the ultimate one for specific reasons.
Yes, very macabre. I mean, the thought of that young woman in the water tank while the guests in the hotel were showering, bathing, and drinking it is just doesn't bear thinking about.
Talk about harvesting death energy. Good God.
Yeah, it's pretty grim. It's pretty grim. So that is the Cecil or the Cecil Hotel. What are your thoughts and theories on the hotel? Is there anything we've missed? Perhaps you've stayed at the hotel, and if so, we'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments. Have you seen the Netflix documentary about it? What were your thoughts on that? What did you think about the manager? Please share your thoughts in the comments for others to read, and we'll be very interested to read them also.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said the manager got away and got on with her life. That's actually quite a nice ending to that story.
Yeah.
Doing something creative.
Yeah, she's making her own jewelry.
You see, and also those kind of creative jobs following a career. And it must have been a hell of a job running that place. The organizational thing must have been enormous and pressure. That's usually spiritual healing is done often through creation and creative and arts and crafts. So she may well now, maybe she has different, maybe looking back on it now, she's remembering things and how it affected her. But either way, I'm glad she got on with her life.
In my October forecast, I said that the current astrology supports open conflicts between the powers that be, and unfortunately, the recent events confirm this. Astrology has originally been used as an indicator of the cosmic weather, so to speak, and not so much individual destinies and individual characteristics, most of all not the pseudo-psychological assessment of character that we know these days, which is basically a total misunderstanding and infantilization of astrology. So what I try to do is simply adhere to the age-old rules of how to see and read the signs and what they can mean personally, but also globally. The month of November is very likely to feel pretty dark, not just because of the approaching days of winter, but also due to a few difficult aspects that will only add to the general and globally perceptible mood that I needn't describe further, I think. However, there are also rays of light that encourage us to seek opportunities for self-improvement, and they aren't that hard to find if only we avert our eyes from that which doesn't concern us. Until November 22nd, we have an opposition between Mars conjunct the Sun in Scorpio and Uranus conjunct Jupiter, both retrograde in Taurus. And Mercury will also be in Scorpio until November 10th. So what exactly does this mean for us? It means that we could be confronted with anger issues, jealousy, insecurity, grudges, sneakiness, passive aggression, and generally things that concern the past and the proverbial death of certain things, ideas, notions, etc. Moods and egos can be pretty unstable in general, and globally I think it's pretty clear what this entails. This is a high potential for escalation and destabilization, along with stubborn insistence on passionate ideas. On November 4th, Saturn goes direct, but will remain in the shadow zone until February 7th, 2024. This means that the themes of the retrograde period will be present until then. Saturn represents natural and societal law and order, and the archetype of the father, the authoritarian ruler who is ideally just and wise, but in his malignant form turns into a ruthless dictator. Pisces is the sign of the collective subconscious and one's own subconscious drives, dreams, escapism, fantasy, illusions, addictive tendencies, and under certain circumstances, religious fanaticism and martyrdom. So individually, Saturn retrograde was a period of revision and waking up to certain illusions, understanding one's karma and karmic consequences, taking accountability and responsibility, because karma is of course also a very important theme of Saturn, who is the lord of time and death and karma. When Saturn goes direct, this can bring a bit of danger in the sense of people or powerful entities trying to deceive and control us. But on the other hand, the principle what goes around comes around will also come into play big time. In medical astrology, Saturn in Pisces stands for weakened immunity and has an influence on lung ailments especially, but also depression, and is connected with drugs or addiction. In the broader sense, Saturn in Pisces can be interpreted as control through the means of Pisces, aka drugs. With a direct Saturn now or after the shadow early next year, we might see a certain three-letter organization that is concerned with the world's health, taking more steps to tighten their grip and trying to impose stricter regulations, or a fortified attempt at bringing in more measures or establishing some new form of treatment. On the other hand, awareness of the aforementioned will also be greater, at least for those who aren't completely lost, of course. What does this mean for us on a very personal level? Stay vigilant. Don't let anyone or anything sway you with a projection of authority. Don't seek escapism from reality other than healthy, creative self-expression. And always be clear that it is not dreaming or defiance that is going to lead to concrete results, but actual, mature, adult behavior and a constructive view of reality. Don't become demoralized through collective fear or sadness. And in echoing last week's psychic weather and psychic hygiene tips, don't take on other people's sorrows. On November 8th, Venus enters Libra, which is a very good placement because Venus rules Libra and is therefore much, much better expressed therein than in reserved, overly cautious, and often insecure Virgo. Libra is highly rational, focused on relationships and harmony and beauty, and we might therefore also try to beautify ourselves or our surroundings, or just find art, music, and aesthetics in general more important. And we will try to bring joy and beauty into our lives, even in small ways. On November 10th, Mercury enters Sagittarius. This is actually a very optimistic and spiritual sign, which promotes an energetic and joyful attitude and is a lot more straightforward than the secretive Scorpio, and it supports the expansion of horizons. Mercury represents our mind and mental faculties, And this sign gives a lot of positivity and motivation, also spiritual motivation, but it isn't the most conducive to continuity and persistence, which means we could get distracted more easily than usual when we go from one interest or project to the next. Normally, Sagittarius is a very positive influence, but given the global situation currently, it enhances the potential for impulsivity and recklessness, which can, of course, express itself in not so spiritually evolved ways. This will be echoed and amplified on November 22nd when the Sun enters Sagittarius, and on November 24th when Mars enters Sagittarius. And this is when it's getting interesting, because with Mars, an aggressive and confrontational streak is added into the already fiery and passionate mix, which I think we can all imagine the potential global developments that this entails. So this could mean that a lot of religious extremism or attacks in this vein might ensue, because Sagittarius represents beliefs, spirituality, and religion. On the flip side, however, Sagittarius season can be a truly positive time for us personally, where we find creative ways to expand our minds and become more inventive, get new ideas and inspiration, and find more joy and optimism within our own lives. On November 13th, we have a new moon in Scorpio, and on November 27th, a full moon in Gemini. I will make separate posts about this in the community tab on my YouTube channel for those who aren't on Facebook, but also on Facebook, Telegram, and Instagram. If you wish to follow me on these platforms and find out what the new moon and the full moon means for your zodiac sign, and are interested in other regular, frequent astrology updates, for example, the red alert days for the month of November, that might be a bit difficult, just follow me. All the links are on my website, and you can also book a personalized reading with me. Until next month, bye-bye.
This week, we are reviewing the 1982 sci-fi horror film Halloween 3, The Season of the Witch, written and directed by Tommy Lee Wallace. And it's the one film in the franchise that doesn't have anything to do with the Michael Myers story. And it was a standalone anthology tale about Halloween. And I do have lots to say regarding the film, but first off, let me give you a brief synopsis. So the plot revolves around a Dr. Daniel Chalice, played by Tom Atkins, and he's a doctor who becomes caught up in a sinister conspiracy after a mysterious patient is admitted to his hospital. And the patient, after being attacked, mutters the words, "They're going to kill us," before clutching a Halloween mask produced by the Silver Shamrock Novelties Company. And the film then takes you to the small town or the small village of Santa Mira, home to the Silver Shamrock factory. And the factory is run by a Connell Cochran, played by Dan O'Herlihy, who is manufacturing a line of Halloween masks that hold a dark secret. And as Halloween night approaches, children all across the country are eagerly awaiting the Silver Shamrock Halloween mask giveaway, not realising the malevolent forces at play. And as Dr. Chalice goes deeper into the mystery, he uncovers a chilling plot that threatens to unleash a wave of deadly chaos on Halloween night. With the help of Ellie Greenbridge, played by Stacey Nelkin, he and her race against time to stop Connell Cochran's sinister scheme. Now, as I've said, this film is a standalone entry in the Halloween series, and while it lacks the iconic presence of Michael Myers, it does compensate somewhat with mixing the elements of science fiction and horror, giving a different take on the Halloween franchise. Now, I'm going to be honest, I didn't think the performances were particularly great. The Doctor was portrayed as a womanizer, and he was always letting his kids down for doing other things. And he'd only known this Ellie for 5 minutes, and he dropped his kids again so he could take her to the Silver Shamrock factory to find out what was going on in regards to her murdered father, which is quite gallant, you might think, until 5 minutes after they arrive and the real reason he's took her there becomes apparent. Classic White Knight syndrome. Anyway, Conal Cochrane was about the most convincing character, and he had a bit of a Willy Wonka vibe to him, and the Silver Shamrock jingle was catchy and innocent, which made it worse when you saw the sinister implications behind it. But the film, however, it does have a lot of shortcomings, including some over-the-top and campy moments that might not appeal to everyone. And the ending in particular, without revealing any spoilers, doesn't necessarily provide the same sense of resolution that many horror films aim for. And the ending might have been considered acceptable under creative license back then, but I thought it was a cop-out. Nothing spoils a film or a book more than a bad ending when the writers don't know how to end it. So if you're looking for closure to the story, then you're not going to find it in this film. All you'll find is one big anticlimax. And it might not be the best film in the series, but it still, finding the positives, it does present an eerie tale that explores the dark side of Halloween. And if you're open to a departure from the Michael Myers narrative and you appreciate some science fiction with your horror, then do watch it at your own peril. Did I enjoy the film? Well, my first viewing of it was in 1984. And as a kid, it left me feeling really uncomfortable. And after watching it again last week, I can honestly say it'll be another 40 years before I consider watching it again. And in my view, it's rather lackluster, riddled with plot holes and gratuitous over-the-top horror elements, such as insects and giant snakes emerging from masks or people's faces. Instead of relying on the more psychological tension, it kind of went into the realm of the early 80s gore, making it feel more like an episode of Creep Show than a fully fledged movie. And even Nigel Neal of Quatermass distanced himself from the film after his original screenplay underwent some revisions. Now, as an adult rewatching it, I come to understand why I was so uncomfortable with it all those years ago. The discomfort arose from it touching upon issues that are relevant today. And first and foremost, it goes into the idea of transhumanism, with the creation of clones or androids or whatever the hell it was that Conal Cochrane was producing in his factory. And what struck me the most was its relevance to the manipulation and the sacrifice of childhood innocence through this deceptive guise of entertainment on the television. And I'm not particularly fond of films where children or animals suffer. And the idea of those eager and innocent kids meeting the doom through those sinister masks is very, very grim. And one scene in particular that left a sour taste in my mouth as an adult and as a child was the demonstration that Cochrane gave involving the TV mad, excessively consuming family known as the Cuffers. And when Cochrane ushered them into the test room and ran the commercial, which activated the boy's mask, it was for me a reminder of the countless parents who willingly sacrificed their own children to the needlecraft in exchange for a free donut or a jelly bean. And that made me think about people who live their lives glued to the TVs, awaiting instruction on what to do and what to watch next. And it made me think of how children are targeted through TV campaigns by companies that don't have their best interests at heart, and how children lack the experience to be able to see this, making them really easy targets. And this is one of the reasons why I don't like the idea of kids dressing up and knocking on strangers' doors, begging for chocolate at Halloween. That's never sat right with me. And some people might think I'm a miserable sod, but it was as if something in my nervous system picked up on this undercurrent when I first watched it back in 1984, even though I wouldn't have been aware of any of that at the time.
Wow. You've just viciously critiqued one of my favorite films of all time.
I'm sorry.
No, you're allowed to. I mean, that's what that goes to show where we don't sit down and plan our reviews.
Am I sacked?
No, but I will try to sell the story to you. Firstly, I think maybe you have to take the thing that this was entertainment. Okay. So, we're naturally inclined to draw allegories between the world of reality and the fictional world portrayed in particularly these kinds of movies. Now, remember, at the time that was made, we didn't have the transhumanist issue, and we didn't have the needlecraft issue. So that's when I saw the film, and it just left a wow factor in me. I think the ending is perfect. I think the ending is, it's just, I love open-ended endings like that. It was a similar kind of ending to the first Planet of the Apes film. There's a kind of like, well, what's that? What's next? But you kind of know what happened, but you don't really know what happened. I do like the ending. I thought he was trying to redeem himself for being a dickhead. And at the end, he was trying to save the families of America because he couldn't save his own family. He couldn't keep his own family together. I thought there was elements of that. I would love to see the Nigel Neal original script that was submitted to the studio before it was altered. It'd be very interesting seeing that. That's a cultural clash. He's a very British author, very British, very, very British. And to have handed that to a Hollywood type, well, there was chalk and cheese. That was going to happen anyway. I think I love the story of how they steal one of the Stonehenge stones. Remember, it's fantasy we're dealing with a movie. We're not dealing with real life. And using the energies in that to put them into the silver shamrock badge that are on the masks. And it plays on ideas of commercialism, like you said, TV addicts and all that kind of thing. The poor woman, she starts looking at the badge falls off her mask, and she's returning defective masks to the company, and she's staying in the same hotel, and she's up late at night, and she picks at one of the mask's badges, and a laser beam comes out and misfires, and we saw what happened. It is quite disturbing when a family are eaten up by the snakes that comes out of the little boy's head and the spiders. I think the automaton thing leading to was fantastic. The way Cochrane had all this collection of these incredible French automatons from 200 years ago, and was building flesh ones or transhumanist ones to actually work in his factory. That scene, it built up and built up, and I remember even the first time I watched it, and it still excites me now, where they know at 9 o'clock, don't forget, Cochrane keeps going, and don't forget the big giveaway at 9 o'clock, for the kids, a free giveaway, chocolates or whatever he was planning, they thought they were going to get, vouchers from the shops or something. And it was fantastic, that build-up, I thought. And you go, 6 more days to Halloween. That thing was terrifying, absolutely. But at the same time, you'll never forget it. It was brilliant. And the John Carpenter music, that was like one of the things. It's like, it's not John Carpenter's film, but he definitely adds his music. And there's a scene that I think is absolutely stunning. It's where they show the kids silhouetted against red skies getting their masks. Now, there's also a magical quality to this film, and let me explain. Our friend Nick, who makes the Saturday morning seance films, sent me a film today for our location report, and amazingly, he included a tiny section of Halloween 3 in it. Now, how about that for something? He had no idea we were doing this review, and we only picked this in advance. So that scene where the kids are in the masks walking towards the silhouettes in that scene, and it shows the cities in America like Kansas City, Los Angeles, whatever. I thought that was a fantastic. And then the John Carpenter, ding, 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 ding. Yeah, the film was worth of that scene. It was like it's the giant pumpkin, Charlie Brown, twisted upside down, and I love the film. It has very happy memories for me when I was watching it back in the day with my friends, and we all talking about it. my American friends all making fun of me. Not really saying things like, "Oh, you only like because it's an Irish, Cochrane is Irish, and it's like it's an Irish town in Santa Mira." And no, it's not that. It's a fucking great film. And yeah, there you go. You didn't really like it. Maybe I think you took it a little too seriously. Maybe a bit sensitive when you watched her for some reason. I don't know, but just okay. But that's not they're not invalid points that you made at all. Not at all. But for me, it's just a fantastic piece of entertainment, and it's well made, well done, well acted, and the ending to me is perfect. And so it just goes to show that two people can watch a film and get different things from it. What I don't, okay, just to indulge you, what didn't I like about it? The character of the girl was just a piece of tail. She was totally unnecessary. She didn't need to exist, and that was one thing. And the other thing was the family who had come to praise Cochrane, the salespeople. This is Mr. So-and-so. He's our biggest salesperson in New Jersey, whatever. He was too much of a goofball stereotype. That was kind of if that guy was the most successful salesman of a particular product in whatever state it was, he wouldn't have looked like that or behaved like that. He would have been a serious businessman. Having said that, I don't, and this is going to annoy you, I don't particularly like the two of the Halloween films. I can't stand Jamie Curtis for some reason. I don't know why. And the Michael Myers thing, I just don't like those kind of slasher films. I mean, half the reason, and I'll tell you something else, many of the reasons why people love Halloween 1, the music, the sense of, for this thing, the way Michael Myers sat at the end of the street, the mask, a lot of those elements were given to you in Halloween 3, but in a different format. And that's all I'd say. I absolutely loved it. Sarah didn't particularly care for it, though she doesn't like certain parts of it. And maybe the fact it's not a perfect film is one of the reasons I like it too. It's because it's a good piece of 1980s horror trash fantasy, and it's a film that you have a bowl of popcorn next to you and not a copy of some analytical psychology text. That's the way I put it.
When I watched it at first as a kid, it frightened me to death. It did. It was on my mind for so many weeks afterwards, the whole thing of the kids, whatever was going on inside that mask, because you didn't see it. It kind of amplified it. What was going on inside that mask to make those snakes come out, and the way the kids were trying to pull it off. And thinking back now, as a kid, I thought there was more scenes of that happening, but there isn't. When I watched it, there's actually only one, but I seem to remember there being more than that. But
and it's a legitimate criticism that you did not bring up is that it's anti-pagan, because Cochrane gives that speech. It was 5,000 years ago on Samhain, and the hills of Ireland ran red with blood, or whatever he says.
Yes. Yeah, and I did think, what a load of crap he's talking about. It's a load of rubbish. But then I expect that in a lot of horror films anyway, anti-pagan. Yeah. So I just let them go over. I let that go over my head. But I think it frightened me as a kid. And watching it as an adult, I'm going to admit it triggered me a bit, because it was kids, and I just kept thinking about all the kids who were marched off to learn needlecraft and get It just reminded me of that, and it made me angry. It made me a bit angry, and that family made me angry. That the Cuffers, the salesman, they'd gone there for a day there, like it was some kind of chocolate factory.
As far as they were concerned, it was just a place that made Halloween novelties and masks. Yeah. But what's the best kind of movie? The one that stays relevant. And that's probably, maybe in the next time you see it in 40 years' time, you'll say, gosh, it was a lot more profound than I thought it was 80 years ago.
One thing about when they brought the stones over from they brought the Stonehenge over from Salisbury, And he said, because the first thing you're thinking is, well, how's he done that? And as you're thinking, how's he done that? He says, oh, you wouldn't believe how we did it.
Well, yeah, I know that was an open end, but remember, this guy was a Bill Gates type billionaire. He was fantastically wealthy, and yeah, you wouldn't believe how we did it. He was also a magician as well, because those, that was a lot. I mean, how did Stonehenge, according to Jeffrey of Monmouth, that's not true, of course, but it's a good story that like Merlin floated him across from Ireland, So they're probably playing on something like that.
Yeah, it wasn't. I wouldn't say it was as bad as what we watched the other week. What was it? The new one we watched about the aliens. Forget that. Is that interesting? Remember the name?
Oh, it was a million times better than that.
Yes, it was. And I'm not going to say don't watch it. I'm going to say go and watch this film.
And it was an original story. I can't think of a film prior to Season of the Witch that's similar. So again, it was but the other thing we saw, the alien thing, was all cliches. It was all
And this film is it is quite squeamish, and it does make you squirm around and think, ooh. And there is it does play with your mind. It plays with your mind because you don't know what you know what fate's going on for these kids, and there's nothing you can do to stop it, and you kind of want to stop it. And I think that's why I didn't like the ending, because I wanted it to stop. I wanted it all to stop and the kids to be okay. And then it's like, oh, well, are they okay or aren't they? I need to know. You know what I mean? It
could have also been the deliberate cliffhanger to make a follow-up.
Yeah.
And apparently it flopped at the box office, but like a lot of 80s films, it developed a cult following on video.
Yeah, there's a lot of films like that, isn't there, from that time?
Oh, I mean, even the films that people think were huge hits, like The Thing, did very badly in the cinema. And that's one of the greatest films ever made,
Maybe we can review that one week.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
The Thing.
I mean, everybody loves that film. That's all I have to say. It's one of my favorite films. Sarah didn't see it the same way. Hey, that's life.
Yeah, so that's Halloween 3, a very creepy story, and a typical cult sci-fi horror movie with lots of themes that would have been irrelevant at the time, but on looking back as an adult, you can see the significance of so many things that have come to pass. And I think that's why I didn't like it so much the second time round. It was a little bit too close to what's going on under the disguise of something else.
A scarred landscape, carved by wheel rut, hoof, footfall and the rilling ever-present water. Over millennia becoming desire lines, holloways, salt track and corpse road. Time bends and rhymes in these places, and is as non-linear as its trackways. There is nothing plain about the Cheshire Plain. Amongst its lanes, herds and knuckled woods lie prehistoric haunted mounds, sacred waters and monuments to humanity's yearning to communicate with the numinous. Rising from the landscape, Lovell's behemoth, Jodrell Bank. Conceived and built in the 1940s, its post-war titanium white bones casting a weird, discordant melancholy over the landscape. a monument to our lostness perhaps, or a signifier pointing to the technological event horizon that's approaching, like something from the typewriter of Nigel Neal, simultaneously reassuring yet unsettling. A melancholic radio-static hiss of the past, present and future. An almost imperceptible disturbance in the grave clay. An atmospheric disquiet. Maybe due to its flatness, a well-established psychotrope, but the monotony of its flat topography is relieved at its northern perimeter, known as the Edge. Just 13 miles south from the centre of Manchester, Alderley Edge, a mineral-rich sandstone escarpment, the southern termination of the Pennines, or, looking north, the end of the flatlands. An in-between place, a liminal, nodal point on the landscape, a place of high and old magic, of above and the below, and at the edge of things. Like most places, it can brag of its UFOs, earth lights, spectral beings, and fairy encounters, but it feels more than that. Until relatively recently, forgotten beneath the root-fasted rock like larval galleries are miles of tunnel, seams worked by the early Bronze Age ancestors, digging for azurite and peacock copper ore, to be magically and alchemically turned into objects by the tribal magus or wizard. Roman shrines to Jupiter have been discovered in these black subterranean arcades. Coins still present on the altar, and bars of gold as if left there yesterday. The magus of the mound builders lives on in legend, transformed in the early medieval period, becoming Merlin, buying a milk-white steed from a local farmer for Arthur's knights who lie slumbering under the hill, awaiting the sounding horn for the last battle of the earth. Although boasting 3 ancient wells, the archetypal magician's name is given to the most renowned spot on the Edge, the Wizard's or Merlin's Well, the face carved into the rock and an inscription, "To take thy fill by the Wizard's will," carved by the stonemason and great-grandfather of Alderley Edge's most heralded son, the writer and archaeologist Alan Garner. This place pulses with magic. You can feel it, almost taste it, like coal smoke on the breeze, and in its bowels some unknowable deep time relic atmosphere, a buried menace or devil's grave. Vestigial links with ritual magic pervade the whole area, from the venerable oaks which form a good portion of the tree canopy to the so-called Druid Circle and the Golden Stone, an unusual prone boulder, curiously shaped, suggestions of some sort of speaking stone or pulpit. And during the 1960s and 70s, the Edge became something of a pilgrimage for occult activity. The offshoot of the Gardnerian Wicca movement used this landscape, headed by self-appointed King of the Witches, known to his acolytes as Verbius, the well-known high priest, and book thief Alex Sanders held coven rituals during moon phases and Sabbats, until his desire for headlines drew too much attention. Since this time, occultists of every stripe have been drawn to the place, with activity both above and below ground in its many caves. And each year during All Hallows, the place comes alive, attracting New Age cosplayers, covens and Thunderbird-soaked teens, looking for thrills and lighting fires, none of which feels coincidental. At the back of the Edge, a Bronze Age burial mound, appropriated in the Tudor period as an armada beacon, which when ablaze, its flame could be seen as far distant as Liverpool and the North Welsh coast. Beacon fire or not, the uncanny atmosphere of the place, vortex-like, draws many with its magical gravity, those who, knowingly or not, perceive the edges and wrinkles in the gauze of reality. It seems ironic that as we look out there to the cosmos with billion-dollar telescopes in hope of discovery of some cosmic armada beacon, the discovery is under our feet in our relationship to these landscapes as we fleetingly move through them in our short tenancy, adding to the palimpsest of stories, strata, and mythology, only to be unearthed in a distant, far-off era.
She may not be Nurse Ratched from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, but she will nurse us through the next week with the psychic hygiene. And here is Sarah.
In our fast-paced, interconnected world, it is so easy to get caught up in a whirlwind of incessant chatter, both from within our own selves and the constant bombardment of external opinions. And this overload of voices can make it difficult to hear the gentle voice of our own spirit. Imagine your spirit as a flame flickering within you. Too much talking, whether it's your own internal dialogue or the clamour of others, can overwhelm and dim that inner flame. Sometimes, in the silence, your spirit has valuable insights that can help you navigate these uncertain times. Now, if all that sounds a bit woo, then consider this. If all the digital noise and social media notifications were transformed into actual voices, it would be a bizarre and maddening experience, a never-ending symphony of chaotic voices, notification bells, dings and chimes would compete for your attention all day and all night, rendering you disoriented, unable to think clearly. And your own thoughts would be drowned out by this relentless noise, leaving you in a state of perpetual agitation and distraction. Now, here's an important insight to go with this. Not taking a stance on something that doesn't concern you doesn't mean you're afraid of what people might think, but rather that you choose peace and will not be goaded by people into the abyss of endless debates and conflicts. Your energy is valuable, and engaging in every single discussion or argument that comes your way can be draining and counterproductive. So remember that you don't need a constant influx of other people's opinions to feel safe or validated. You have the inner wisdom to make decisions that align with your true self. Taking time alone for some solitude is not neglecting your responsibilities. It's nurturing your inner world, which in turn improves your outer experiences. So make it a point to carve out a few minutes for yourself today or tomorrow. The more you allow yourself to be with your spirit and your divine source, the more clarity and purpose that you'll find in your actions and decisions. In the quiet of your time alone, you'll find that harmonious balance between the inner and outer voices, and your life may just become a symphony of genuine insight rather than that chaotic cacophony of digital noise and unwanted opinions. By choosing peace over endless engagement, you can protect your inner flame from being extinguished by the constant clamour of the world. And that's my psychic hygiene suggestion for this week.
Monkish solitude, yeah, something that's very important and very good for your health, probably even your physical health too. Thanks for that, Sarah.
You're welcome.
And the second topic tonight will be a surprising one. At first, you'll say, well, what has this got to do with hocus pocus type things? Bear with me. We'll get there. It is a feature and a profile of a woman I find remarkably fascinating and have developed even a strong appreciation for her work. And that is the artist Marina Abramovic. Now, I know many of you, as soon as you hear this, are going to go, ah, you know, especially in the alt or the truth scene, she's synonymous with some kind of devil or something. A lot of this had to do with Alex Jones in 2017, basically claiming that her spirit cooking exhibition work was a gigantic satanic ritual and so on, which it wasn't. I'll explain it to you. But that doesn't distract from the fact that I believe that Marina Abramovic comes from a tradition of European shamanism that has been lost. And in her own kind of performance art way, she's kind of bringing it back. Now, we'll talk about her early life first. Marina Abramovic was born in November 30th, 1946. So she's gone on 77 now, and she still looks fabulous for her age. And that was in Belgrade, which was then the Federal People's Republic of Yugoslavia, a country that no longer exists. Both her parents are Montenegrins. Now, Yugoslavia basically imploded into an awful civil war in 1990. And when she's asked where she's from, she quite rightly states, I'm from a country that no longer exists. But yet she was central to that. Both her parents were Montenegrin fighters in the Serbian partisans against the Third Reich in World War II, and were both war heroes. And they're meeting basically on the battlefield fighting Nazism in the Balkans. It's like something out of a romance novel. You wouldn't believe it otherwise. It's like, it's unbelievable. Her mother came from a well-to-do, in the communistic terms, what they call the red bourgeoisie, very heavily connected to the old Orthodox Church in Yugoslavia, and the arts tradition. Now, they wouldn't be like elitist like you get in Europe. Yugoslavia was a very different type of communist country. Tito did not run Yugoslavia the way many other Eastern European dictators and governments ran their countries under communism. People were still allowed to own their own farms. They were allowed to choose their own careers in life, whatever they wanted to do. There was a lot of freedom. There were people could start businesses and own companies and even export. And so there was a tremendous amount of freedom in Yugoslavia. The country in its short history was also very successful. Under communism, by the 1980s, they had a standard of living that was comparable to many Western European countries. In fact, I think Yugoslavia even had a higher standard of living than Ireland did in the 1970s and 80s. And then they were very successful in sport and everything. It was a very successful, short-lived nation that imploded. And she's kind of like an embodiment of that in some ways. Her father, on the other hand, came from a working class family with strong military connections. Now, although her mother and father had this like kind of Hollywood, almost, girls' own romance in the battlefields, when they got married and gave birth to her, it all kind of fell apart. Her father realized how very different he was than her mother. And they basically, from the time she was born, it all fell apart. She was sent off to live with her grandmother, who was a devoutly religious Serbian Orthodox practitioner woman. And this gave her Marina, a tremendous appreciation for religion, ritual, and the kind of spiritual tradition that was denied to her by her parents. Again, it was Yugoslavia. You could practice your religion, no problem. So when she was 6, she went back to live with her parents, and nothing had changed. And her mother became brutal towards her. She beat her constantly, to one point where she developed a nosebleed that didn't stop. And doctors believed that she had leukemia. And she went away for hospital, and they thought it was some kind of undiagnosed new disease. They couldn't explain her nose bleeding, and she was in hospital for a whole year. And she lost so much blood, she had to have transfusions and everything. Now it turns out that it was probably some kind of psychosomatic thing. Her father, on the other hand, adored her and did everything to encourage her and make her happy in life. But there was always that problem at home. And the mother somehow blamed her for the romance going out of their relationship. Not only did the mother beat her senselessly, but she ran her like a military regime. Even up to the age of her mid-20s, she had to be home by 10 a.m. made it very impossible for her to have boyfriends and things like this. The mother used to also, while she was a young girl, lock her in a closet, a darkened closet. And it was in this darkened closet that the young Marina started to have visions and communicate with spirits and beings. And that began her lifelong interest in the occult. Yes, she is a occultist, probably. She's definitely fascinated by the stuff, and her friends have said that she's had a lifelong interest in it. Even though she doesn't publicly talk about it, it does come out in her work. She attended the Academy of Fine Arts in Belgrade and the Academy of Fine Arts in Zagreb in Croatia. Now, because Yugoslavia was the way it wasn't close to the West, and she became very interested in performance art, which was taken over basically Western art at that time. And she lost interest in painting and moved her work towards performance art. She moved in, her first thing was she moved into Western Europe, and she started performing in places like Edinburgh and around the UK and in Amsterdam, where she met the German performance artist known as Ule, and they started collaborating together on themes of relationship intensity. It was almost like she was working out her father's and mother's relationship in a performance art intense relationship with this guy Ule, who she also became involved in and living with. And this would involve things like them screaming in each other's faces, beating each other up quite violently. Marina Abramovic has remarkable stamina, even for her age now. She, in all her work, she's taken enormous amounts of abuse and physical abuse by herself and by her collaborators, such as Ule. And this was often involved cutting, sometimes occultic symbols like a pentagram into her stomach, pushing a dagger around her fingers in a kind of a Russian roulette game, and recording the sounds. And you'd first say this person is disturbed, but then you realize how awful her childhood was. She's using her performance art as a mean to almost heal it. So her relationship with Ule was, in terms of their working relationship, was very much, almost seemed to me on the outside looking in, as a way of her resolving on some kind of spiritual or psychic level the dysfunctionality of her own parents' relationship. Now, their relationship ended very strange, very interesting way. They decided to end it with a kind of a spiritual pilgrimage, walking across the Great Wall of China. And she started in the Yellow Sea, I believe, and he started in the Gobi Desert. And they met in the middle after a long trek on either side of the wall. And then they decided to end a relationship there and then, which is kind of incredible when you think about it. Now, some of the stuff they did is unbelievable. One included an exhibition in Dublin where she held a bow and he held the arrow with two fingers. And the video is available online. And honestly, you will be literally terrified watching this. And she falls back from him, and the bow extends and the arrow is withdrawn, and he's holding with two fingers. All it would take for him to kill her would be to release those two fingers. There's been other exhibitions where she's had a loaded revolver and with bullets in it available to exhibition goers while she was there, and if they wanted to kill her, they could. Now, you want to talk about performance art, take it to the limit. She has. She's done that. Now, I first came into my interest in it was not with the spirit cooking working, but with the Artisan is Present, which was held in MoMA in New York in 2010, where for 3 months she sat all day in a chair, and members of the general public came in and sat across from her. She dressed in a very strange kind of dress that was some are blue, some are red, some are white, that were kind of almost like wizardy looking when you see them. And the toilet, the chair that she sat on was fitted with a toilet so she wouldn't have to leave. The woman's physical stamina is incredible, you know, and she was no spring chicken when she did this. And the Artist is Present is one of the most amazing things you'll ever see. she sits on the chair, a person from the public comes in, and they just stare at each other for a period of time. And there's nothing said, there's just eye contact. And many people, all the people who did it, said it was like almost the most profound spiritual experience of their life. And when you see looking into her eyes, you see that kind of like, this is a person who's trying to change the nature of human relationships into something different. And there's something about her eyes, and a lot of men said they fell in love with her looking at her into her eyes. And I have to say, watching some of those videos myself, I definitely was crushing on her, looking at her. Yes, she's an attractive woman and all that. She's not the most beautiful in the world, but she's still very attractive. And there was just something about her eyes. Was I being lured into a trap or something? I don't know, but that's part of the thing. Other people had profound insights into their families, into their own dysfunctionality without a single word being said. She stayed there for the entire 3 months of March, April, and May of the 2010 at MoMA, and it became one of the most sensational exhibitions of all time. The spirit cooking one is very interesting too, in that it seems to have strong roots in chaos magic. She claims it's something of a satire, where you write books that contain messages that are using energy feedings for the dead, as an Eastern European belief that there are certain rituals that you partake in this life that feed nourishment of energy to ghosts and the dead. And that was what spirit cooking literally meant, preparing meals in this reality in order to feed the other side. And if that's not occultic, I don't know what it is. Now, this was interpreted as Satanism and stuff and all this kind of other thing by the usual kind of Christian crowd. And I totally get why people could be put off by her. I don't find that at all. I'd love to meet her, actually. I find her quite appealing in many ways. That's the way, yeah, she's a performance artist, body artist, shock artist, and what they call endurance art. But I think what she should be really known as is a shaman. And we live in an age where people look for the modern shamans within sort of like cosplay spirituality. You have all these people who call themselves shamans, and they attend workshops in Glastonbury, or they call themselves druids, and they're not really any of those things, and they might have a staff. But I think what Marina Abramovic does with her performance art, from the time she moved to Western Europe on to today, is contemporary shamanism. And she is finding ways to heal her childhood trauma through incredible levels of endurance within her art, both psychic, psychological, and physical, in order to communicate with beings from the other side or entities from the other side in order to heal that. And it seems like she's done it for the most part. And so next time you think of Marina Abramovic, in my opinion, think shaman. And that's that. So what do you think of it all, Sarah?
Well, I do know and appreciate that she's a big name in the world of contemporary art, and that for most of her career they've celebrated her because she's very avant-garde and she does these very challenging performances. But for all what you've said there, she's not, maybe I'll look at her with a different eye now. She's not someone I've been able to connect with through her work. For those that love her, that's great too. But I'm only being honest with what I've seen from my own subjective views on her performance art. And I think one of the main factors that kind of distances me from it is that whole genre of extreme art or endurance art. I've always found it quite difficult to watch. And while I understand and respect the intention behind pushing the boundaries and exploring the edges of the human experience, and even now, after what you've said, as a form of healing from a very difficult childhood, because you even mentioned earlier in the first topic with the hotel manager from the Hotel Cecil, when she went on to do the jewellery, it's usually when you've gone through something, you start to create as a spiritual way to heal the self. So yeah, I understand that, but for me, I just seem to prefer art that speaks to me on a more subtle kind of level, and I find that a lot of the extreme art quite overwhelming and dark, and I think that's one of the reasons why I find it quite hard for me to immerse myself in it, because I think with extreme art, you've got to immerse yourself in it, you've got to put yourself in with both feet and experience it. It's not just something you can sit and watch. I think you have to feel it. And the famous rhythm series that she did, including those performances where she did the self-harm with the knife, I forget the name of it, Russian Fingers, I think it was called. Yeah, and then the intense audience participation, again, just doesn't align with my own personal taste in art. And I'm going to ask, actually, in, I think it was Rhythm 2 in 1974, she had a duration of 50 minutes, and during that time she ingested a medication which was given to patients who suffer from catatonia to force them to change the positions of the bodies, and the medication caused the muscles to contract quite violently, and she lost complete control over her body while remaining aware of what was going on. And then after a 10-minute break, she took a second medication given to schizophrenic patients with violent behavior to calm them down. And then the performance ended after 5 hours when the medication wore off. And I just don't understand why. Why
Well,
would
that's,
you do that?
yes. I didn't understand until I started to see it within the context of shamanism. Now, people have a very twisted idea of the West in what shamanism is today. They think it's banning a drum and doing Indian or something like that. If people today who call themselves shamans were to go back and see what the real shamans of the past did, the endurance levels and things what they did, they would die of fright, because you have to, it's that whole thing of annihilation gnosis within chaos magic, that you have to take yourself to the point of absolute destruction to attain enlightenment. That's a fact. That's an absolute fact. I can remember Tina did a very funny video a few years ago called Spiritual Karens. And I told a story that I'd seen. I was on a witchcraft group on Facebook with those kinds of spiritual Karens. And they were all talking about removing a curse. And a real African witch doctor from Africa came on and said, you're doing it in a way that won't remove the curse. You have to find a fast-flowing river and cut the neck of a black chicken over and pour its blood into the river as you expel the curse. Well, there was mayhem on this group. A real magician finally showed up, and they went bonkers because they got the real thing. And that's what her work is like. That's what real shamanism is like. It's like everything in life, it's an acquired taste. I wouldn't particularly watch those rhythm workings, many of the others. Although when I saw the one with the energy, the rest energy one in Dublin with the bow and arrow, I was literally, and I was just watching a video that was from like 1980, 40 odd years ago, and it still freaked me. What must have been like to be there watching it? And yes, I mean, I think that's how I see her, as a shaman. I think she secretly practices shamanism. Her interest in the occult is well known. Her desire and her actual history of communicating with spiritual beings is known. That's shamanism, right? And yeah, I mean, that's what stop seeing. I totally get that's not art, although that's a weird thing to say because art. I've seen performance. I've been watching performance art all my life. You have a background in actual, academic arts, right? 90% of it, I think, is absolutely stupid. Okay, I go, but this is why I still visit municipal art galleries. In amongst all this absolute shite, I will find something that will blow me away. It will hit me there, and I will see the intense genius of it. And that's why I still visit these municipal galleries, and from Milton Keynes to Sligo and everywhere in between. Now and again, something will just make me go, "Oh my God," amongst all the pap and nonsense. Okay, and that's what the effect that she's had on me. It's everything else I've seen is just shock art for the sake of shock, performance art for the sake of some made up pretentious bullshit. But where she has taken it is somewhere completely different in between. She has a foundation, a psychological foundation. She didn't grow up in a perfect family and then does things like pisses on a crucifix, screaming, this kind of nonsense. And she doesn't do it for just the state of shock, because there's people who do things like they put suppositories of paint up their bum and swing from ropes. That's shock to get a name. She doesn't do it for that reason. You can see she's literally in a trance when she's doing these things. And that's a shamanic trance, and that's how I see her. And I totally get why some people wouldn't want to deal with it. But there's people like me who were at like, well, what's this? It's interesting. And then suddenly now I'm fascinated by it.
It must be a form of healing for her to put herself through that pain, the pain that she puts herself through, some of those performances and the risks that she puts herself through. Because in rhythm number 4, she was kneeling down naked in a room with a high-powered industrial fan. And she crawled to the fan slowly, and she attempted to breathe in as much air as possible to push the limits of her lungs. And not long after, she lost consciousness. So there must be a healing element there somewhere.
No, that's the annihilation gnosis. That when you pull yourself to the point of obliteration, it's the whole thing of my whole life flashed before me before I died, and I suddenly had the answers to everything. It's why this has been a long practice, from walking on coals to strangulation, that to put a plastic bag over your head and having someone pull it off just as you collapse, to maybe many endurance sports, even things like mountain climbing and stuff like that. Yes, it's like when Brian Blessed in his 60s was still climbing the most dangerous mountains in the world. And they were saying to him, someone said to him, why do you go there to die? He goes, I don't go to these mountains to die. I go there to live. And this is an extreme variation of this, But what annoys me is people breaking it down to, it's satanical and it's, devil. It's none of those things. It's like beyond that, And I'm glad people like her exist. I'm glad people like her exist for that reason. You don't have to actually like someone to appreciate their existence. That's the way I feel about it, And that particular scene where Ule appears at the artist's present, it's gone viral on the internet, and she looks up and sees him, and the look on her face is incredible, really. And there was a very, that change. There was a very deep soul in there. She also had terrible teenage years as well. Remember, her mother was like the mother in Carrie, and she wouldn't let her have boyfriends and stuff. And she had big, thick communist welfare glasses because her eyesight was so poor. And she was taller than the other girls, and everyone made fun of her because she was kind of gangly and this kind of thing. And that we all, it just seemed to me that she had, maybe her mother was suffering from post-traumatic stress from the war. She being a frontline combat troop and stuff, and her father too. And her mother and father's story is remarkable, and then it falls apart. It's almost like she should have grown up in the perfect home. 2 war heroes who were rewarded with good jobs within the Yugoslavian government after the war, in an environment that encouraged, her artistic desires. And her father was extremely supportive of her artistic, desires as a young girl, and bought her paints and canvases with any money he had, and took her to any artist he knew that nearby that was interesting. He'd bring her to meet them and stuff like this. It was almost like Marina Abramovic should have had the perfect childhood, but she went through absolute hell. And it's almost like this is all a way of trying to understand why.
Yeah, to understand why. She, I read a bit for an interview with her today, and it made me laugh. It wasn't particularly funny, but it was the irony of it. And she said that about a mother saying that she had to be indoors by 10 p.m. up to the age of 29 years old. And she said she was going to the art galleries of an evening doing these rhythm performances, where she's bringing herself to the point of death on most of these performances, but having to be aware of the time because she had to be home by 10 o'clock.
It's incredible, isn't it? And it's like she defected to Western Europe, not out of communism, but to get away from her mother. That's a terrible thing by itself. So I will wrap it up at that. Look, I know most of the comments in it are going to be extremely negative, or for many people are surprised that we covered this. But part of having a Fortean ontological mindset is not just about ghost hunting or looking for UFOs or learning about ancient sites or mysteries of the past. It's also about being open-minded and understanding that the forces that are behind things like our desires to be, like ontological or Forteana, are driven by personal experiences we've had growing up and personal cultural things. And I think in many ways, Marina Abramovic is the ultimate expression of that in her life. So if anything you've learned, like many people have a very, you look at Marina Abramovic, you're seeing what a shaman would be like. We still have shamanism in the West today. Put it that way.
I think.
And once you understand that, coupled with the appalling childhood she had, it all comes into focus in a very, very different way. That's far more mature, far more in depth, and will give you a proper appreciation of the reality of the world, aside from just listening to Alex Jones screaming about it being Satanism. Remember, you have to keep your mind open to even things you don't like in order to grow as a person.
I think after having this discussion about her tonight and talking about the shamanism and the annihilation gnosis aspect of it and the healing side of it all, I'll certainly look at her, some of her performances with a different eye now, because some of those things kind of make a little bit more sense now, especially in the sense of shamanic healing or shedding your skin. And I was thinking while you was talking about the artist is present and about the people sat in front of her and just making the eye contact. And I'm wondering if she did that to see if she could really understand people.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Really see behind the mask,
Well, in the rhythm working where she carves it with a knife, the star, the pentagram into her body, into her belly, people automatically assumed that was the pentagram occult symbol. It could be also the star on the Yugoslavian flag. And that she was almost like aborting that world that she grew up in or something. But yeah, I mean, then when you start talking about this, like you said, what you said, then you start to see it in whole other ways. The Russian roulette thing with the knife on the fingers, that, she could be like, how come my parents both survived frontline combat against the Nazis? Like, what are the chances of that? I remember the Third Reich's invasion of the Balkans was absolutely brutal, and the Germans got a hell of a battering down there by the Serbian partisans. At the same time, too, there was something of an internal civil war going on within Yugoslavia because the Croats had joined up with the Nazis. So, and there was horrible things went on in that country. So, I mean, she could be. And I don't mean this in a negative way. She could be the ghost of Yugoslavia embodied in a kind of a shamanic artist.
Yeah. It's interesting.
And this is what being having a hauntological mind is seeing beyond the surface level, being a little bit of a psychologist, a little bit of a mystic, and also maybe a little bit of a social worker, and saying what she went through as a child, can you blame her for following these pursuits? And so, you know, I know most of you will be quite taken back by this subject covered here, but I think it's a perfect subject for Hocus Pocus. And I'd love to hear what you want to say. You're probably hearing all this stuff for the first time ever, because all you've heard is the kind of like the spirit cooking thing. Recently, I believe Zelensky asked her to be some kind of minister in Ukraine. I don't know what happened. She probably laughed at it. But then people, so you know, these things are not important. What's important is what drives someone to basically revive shamanism in the West or in Europe in an age where it's long gone, and how seeing what shamanism is, in this case being expressed as performance art or endurance art, terrorizes people who think it's about banging a drum and it's basically kumbaya, you know, type events. So Marina Abramovic, if nothing else, I'm glad she exists.
She did a performance where she had I think it was 7 or 8 things on the table, from a feather to a jar of honey to nails and all kinds of things that could hurt you as well. And she said that was an audience participation, and each member of the audience could sit in front of her and pick one of these items and do anything they wanted to with it. And at first, all the people were a bit nervous about it, you know, just using the feather and just, you know, touching it with the feather. And it was after a few hours, people started to get a bit braver and then they started to hurt her, to do things with the knife and things like that. And I'm wondering, is that a shamanic way of making the mental pain stop? Does that make the mental pain go away? Because it takes your mind off the mental scars that you have from your past.
Yeah, trying to understand, is there other people like my mother out there? And how do they get started? Like this, there's one of the rhythm workings where her and Ule are naked and they're beating each other. And they're really letting it go at each other, clattering at each other. One point she hits him so hard that the force of the hit knocks her over, like the recoil from it. And another, you know, to do that in front of other people, you know, you could say it's nuts, but when you see her interviewed as a person, she's obviously not nuts. She's quite intelligent and quite sensitive, comes across as very likable, actually, in many ways. And people who've worked with her said that she's like a sweetie and a really nice person and kind and considerate. So, you know, again, you know, maybe she's, you know, it's all about healing at the end of the day. And that's what shamanism is. It's medicine.
Yeah, but healing in alternative ways to banging a drum. It's more serious, isn't it? It's more.
You won't heal anything banging a drum and chanting. You won't. The thing that caused you pain and trauma can only be corrected in equal measures of pain and trauma. It's that simple. That's why when we carry around guilt inside us, we develop medical ailments. It's like for like. And she's trying to level her odds while she's still alive without going nuts. That's what I think it is. And why not? Maybe I'm sure she's helping other people too.
There's no such thing as bad weather, only the wrong clothing. So get your Renfield Rain Max and your Welly Bobs at the ready, just in case. It's time for Thomas with the psychic weather.
And this week's psychic weather is my favorite kind, one that I've evaluated while traveling. And I've been in 2 countries this week, and also was on a boat at sea, so I I get a more sort of holistic view of things in different regions and places and stuff. I would say that at the moment, and this is quite common with waxing gibbous moons, when we're out to the full moon, I think, well, definitely by the time this comes out, it will be. There's a sense of bewilderment, and we are living in a time of a great bewilderment, right? People don't seem to know what was going on. And I was watching people's bodies language, the average person, and their body language is very much like lost souls. There's a lot of that. That's usually born out of confusion at a deep level. What's my life about? What's next? What's going on? Where is all this heading? What's the point? Not in a particularly depressive or highly negative way, but in a way like, the universe, the government, anyone, and it's probably because of what's going on in the world right now with the political situation in Eastern Europe and the Middle East, and not to mention the fallouts from the Boy I Say Boy and all that people are bewildered and they don't know who to turn to, and they're not getting any answers. For the rest of us, you probably know why they're bewildered, because we're not part of the normie sphere and we see the world in a different way. But that's the psychic weather this week. It is a low pressure front of bewilderment.
Perhaps some people are bewildered because they finally realised that the TV, the box in the corner that they used to take their instruction from daily, is not to be relied upon anymore. So they don't know who to turn to, who do I turn to now? Where do I get my instruction from? Because I can't rely on it anymore. I don't know what to do. I have to look within, and I don't like that. Maybe that's what they're thinking.
And also, they know now, if they don't know, they're fools that the politicians don't give a damn about them. And even the ones who are the most sort of like zealot defenders of establishment, they don't have the same zeal and punch that they once did. So but also this is also a positive thing, because a period of bewilderment usually means that something calm before the psychic storm thing, but not necessarily a negative one. It could be quite positive. It could be the people have had enough in their own kind of way, but it's always going to be a tiny minority who'll ever make anything better. But yeah, I see it everywhere. I saw it everywhere. It was just bewilderment everywhere. I saw lots of people making mistakes, dropping things, not being able to do things properly, and it's confusion, brain fog. Now, it could be because of the transubstantiation, the Boy I Say Boy. I think, yeah, in some cases, absolutely. But I think in a lot of cases, they're like, where is this world and what am I doing here? And what is my purpose? And this is a question you should have been asking before 2020. And if you weren't asking it before 2020, you're going to find it incredibly difficult to answer now.
When you think about the roller coaster ride that we've all been on since March 2020, we've gone from one narrative to another without no respite in between, straight out of one and into another, and each one has become more ridiculous. And now the people are realizing that the people that rule us don't care about us.
How many years have I been talking about the global gaslighting by the psychopathic control grid? Yeah. Now they're all seeing it.
Yeah. And even, I don't know about you, but myself, when I look back to 2020, I think, did that really happen? I'm not sure I would be able to explain that now. At the time, we could explain it, but when you look back at it, you think, did I dream that?
And they're doing the same position, but they don't have the toolkits that we had to do it.
Now it's time to dive into some literature and share some of the books from our personal collection. These books have both influenced and left a lasting impression on us, earning themselves a permanent spot on our bookshelves. And we hope that by sharing them with you, we can inspire you to discover more exciting books to add to your own collections. And my book this week is Many Lives, Many Masters by Dr. Brian Weiss. And it's a book about spirituality, reincarnation, and past life regression. And Weiss is a traditional psychiatrist, and he kind of takes you on a journey through the experiences of his patient called Catherine and the deep impact that her therapy has on both of their lives. And it covers Catherine's very interesting story as a patient who's struggling with inexplicable phobias and anxiety. And through a series of hypnotherapy sessions, Weiss discovers that Catherine's fears and emotional baggages are deeply rooted in her past lives. And as Catherine revisits her past incarnations, healing and spiritual growth occur, leading to a transformation in her emotional and mental well-being. And Weiss presents all of these experiences with both a scientific and a spiritual mind. And the way in which he mixes his clinical observations with metaphysical ideas gives you a fascinating glimpse into this synergy, if you like, between modern medicine and ancient wisdom. And the writing is very, very clear and easy to read. And it takes some really complex issues and makes them understandable. And it's a book that you could read in a weekend, really. It's a very easy read. And he manages to convey his own skepticism and eventual acceptance of the spiritual dimension in a non-dogmatic manner, which makes it easy for us as readers to each consider our own beliefs in light of the book's revelations. And his skepticism was ended when Catherine began to channel messages from what's known as the space between lives, which contained remarkable revelations about the author's own life. And she was acting as a channel for information from highly evolved spirit entities, which she called the Masters. And she revealed many secrets of life and death. And so the book provides a really good perspective on the power of the mind and the potential for healing across lifetimes, as well as giving intricate details of the space between lives. And it's a must read for those interested in the bridge between science and spirituality and the potential of past life regression therapy. And as I say, it's a book you could read in a weekend, and its pages aren't full of fluff or padding, and it goes straight to the meat and gravy of the subject. And there is actually just a paragraph I'd like to read to you from the book. Throughout history, humankind has been resistant to change and to the acceptance of new ideas. Historical lore is replete with examples. When Galileo discovered the moons of Jupiter, the astronomers of that time refused to accept or even to look at these satellites because the existence of these moons conflicted with their accepted beliefs. And so it is now with psychiatrists and other therapists who refuse to examine and evaluate the considerable evidence being gathered about survival after bodily death and about past life memories. Their eyes stay tightly shut. This book is my small contribution to the ongoing research in the field of parapsychology, especially the branch dealing with our experiences before birth and after death. Every word that you will be reading is true. I have added nothing, and I have deleted only those parts that were repetitive. I have slightly changed Catherine's identity to ensure confidentiality, and it took me 4 years to write about what happened. 4 years to garner the courage to take the professional risk of revealing this unorthodox information. Suddenly, while one night I was taking a shower and I felt compelled to put this experience down on paper, and I had a strong feeling that the time was right and I should not withhold this information any longer. The lessons I had learned were meant to be shared with others, not to be kept private. The knowledge had come through Catherine, and now it has to come through me. And I knew that no possible consequence I might face could prove to be as devastating as not sharing the knowledge I had gained about immortality and the true meaning of life. I rushed out of the shower and sat down at my desk with the stack of audio tapes I had made during my sessions with Catherine. And in the wee hours of the morning, I thought of my old Hungarian grandfather who had died while I was still a teenager. Whenever I would tell him that I was afraid to take a risk, he would lovingly encourage me by repeating his favourite English expression. "Vat the hell," he would say. "Vat the hell."
I have that book with a different cover. I just couldn't find it right then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a good read. It's well written. It's very popular, and it's not in the least airy fairy.
No, I was put off reading it for a little while because of the title, Many Lives, Many Masters, and I was wondering if it was to do with ascended masters and things like that. You know, it kind of put me off a bit, but it's not. It doesn't go down that road at all.
No, the cover I have is very different artwork, and it doesn't. That looks a bit kind of new agey. That artwork you have. The one I have is a bit more dark.
Right. This is a 1988. No, sorry, 1990. Oh gosh, no, it's a reprint from 1994 to 2013. So it's quite
I have the original 80s one, yeah. It's a different artwork. But anyway,
right.
yeah, it's a very interesting read.
Yes.
And if you're interested in reincarnation, life after death, it's definitely should be in the library. Now, my book this week is not a book. Well, it's a kind of a book. It's a tarot deck. And it's the Aleister Crowley, Lady Farida Harris Thought Deck. The reason why I'm featuring it this week is I'm retiring this after 13 years. I've gotten a new deck and this is going away. It served me very well in the last 13 years and I'm putting it away. If you're not aware of this deck, it was created by Aleister Crowley and Lady Farida Harris during World War II. She was literally traveling across London as German bombs were dropping on the city with the artwork for these decks, for this deck. And it's got a very much kind of Art Deco. It's not like it doesn't have any kind of antiquarian arcane look to it. I'll just show you some of the cards. The Tower card, for instance, it shows the all-seeing eye above the tower that's absolutely being obliterated by fire, to suggest and to denote the energetic aspects. Like a lot of other tarot cards just show the tower falling. This is showing through the fire at the bottom a dynamic burst of energy that leads to it, rather than how it's enormously depicted, usually depicted by the flash of lightning hitting the top of the tower. This one is revelation and insight causing the collapse. You discovered something that has just completely wrecked your world and shattered the foundations of your own psychic stability or cultural or social stability. That's why I love this version of the tower. Another one, interesting one, is the Ace of Discs, which is the coins in most decks. He calls them discs. She made the artwork look like the arcane description of an angel. You know, they do not be afraid. The kind of scary biblical angels. Well, they actually go back quite further beyond Hebrew, in this kind of winged, multi-winged, strange being, with the disc in the middle. Generally, this is considered the best of all tarot cards in terms of giving good fortune and luck and happiness. The Fool, he's very shamanic looking. His eyelids have been torn off, and he's staring into the endless possibilities before him within this dynamic mechanism of consciousness that he's now becoming aware of. One of my favorites, you've heard me talk about this in videos, is the Ace of Swords, the cold sword of the north, associated with the Odin region. How many videos did I talk about this during the lockdown and everything? That Odinic energy was coming from the north. And you have this kept showing up and up again. And what does that look like? The needle, and that's kind of thing. And it has the crown, the corona. This was like a very powerful card during all that period. The Wheel of Fortune, just called Fortune, contains Sobek, the Egyptian crocodile god, at the bottom. Quite attractive colors. I love the Death card because the death is at the bottom of the ocean, taking all the decayed and dead matter, and in a very dynamic, fluid, almost scientific way, firing it back up to the surface as new life. It's not just death, it's reincarnation. The universe card, this gets you, and this is one of the reasons why it's banned in many prisons in the USA, because all this new naked women imagery on it's considered pornographic. And finally, the Magus, the magician, and very Art Deco. It looks like that could belong on the Chrysler Building in New York. Art Deco is kind of magic anyway. So I'm returning this deck. I got a new one, the Raider White one with the beautiful artwork, the luminous old school again. But so this deck has served me well for the last 13 years, and its time is coming out and ended. I've been reevaluating a lot of my own occultic practice and magic in recent weeks, and I've been closing a lot of doors behind me in terms of processing and concepts and ideas and trying to move forward in a different way. And so the last 13 years, it serves me beautifully. And I highly recommend the deck. It's even a good deck for beginners. It's an intense deck in its own way. There's some very good, not too many good guidebooks to go along with it. But there's the Don Milo de Quet has quite a good one. It's definitely a good one to go with this. It has a good insight into esotericism anyway, but I like the size of it. If you're going to get this deck, get the small size one. It's easy to shuffle the cards. So that's my book this week, a book of stories, a book of archetypes, a book of magic, a book of the occult, of divination and secrets, the top deck by Aleister Crowley and Lady Farida Harris. And it's got on the back of each one of them the Rose Cross.
What made you decide to retire that deck then and go with the Rider-Waite? Was it just an insight or an intuition, or was there something in particular?
Nothing in particular, but there seems to be a lot of closing stuff going down. I'm kind of moving in a different direction now, my own kind of beliefs and stuff like that. And it's a developing process. It's a developing thing. And I felt like one of the reasons I got I forget what it's called, not the Enchanted, it's like the colorful Rider-Waite. It's a better, the art is better rendered.
Yes, I've got two of them.
Radiant it was the same size as that one.
Yeah.
I found one and it was in a tin.
Yeah.
And so it was a handy one to put in my pocket. Where a lot of decks I find are too big, and I've always wanted that one for a while, and I just picked it up and I said, you know what, you're coming home with me, and Crowley and Lady Harris are going into the bookshelf. It happens.
Yeah, I've got the Radiant Rider-Waite and Rider-Waite, and I've got the other one, the original one, the one that's a bit murky looking.
Yeah, I have a few decks, but the only one I was really using constantly was the Thoth deck.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, you amazing bunch of Forteans, you. And we can't express enough gratitude for all the love, support, likes, shares, and positive vibes that you showered upon us and our individual channels. Seriously, you guys are amazing. And also a special shout out to Nick from Saturday Morning Seance for his wonderful location report today, and to Olivia from Sun Moon Self for the astrological forecast for November. So thank you very much for doing those specials to put together for the episode this week. And a special shout out to everyone who participated in the live chat last week. Again, it was an absolute blast seeing you all dive into the Fortean rabbit hole together, exchanging ideas and theories and just having a good old time. And we hope those connections continue to flourish and grow into fantastic friendships. You guys are the heart and soul of this community. So here's a big virtual hug and a heartfelt thank you for being part of this Fortean tribe. And please spread the word far and wide and tell your friends, tell your family, tell your neighbours, and even that quirky conspiracy-loving cousin of yours, and let's keep this Fortean party going strong. Next time, we will be here with another mind-boggling episode, and trust us, you won't want to miss what we have in store. So stay curious, stay weird, and remember that the truth is out there waiting to be uncovered.
I'd echo everything that Sarah said. I will try to get into the live chat this Sunday. I was away last week, and because I want to see this broadcast as it's going out. And again, thanks to Nick and Olivia for their participation. And anyone else wants to send in a location report, you're more than welcome. If it's, once it suits the format of the show. I think I'm sure you liked Nick once tonight. It had a strong ontological as well as almost philosophically Fortean thing, which is stuff we love. And there's mysteries under your own feet outside your front door, and if you want to tell the stories, here we are. And with no further ado, it won't be the top deck, but here's Sarah with the tarot card of the week. What's the tarot card this week, Sarah?
This week it is the Four of Swords. And it ties in perfectly with this week's psychic hygiene suggestion about taking some time in solitude. And there's an image of a knight lying on a raised stone, a stone tomb or a bed, and his hands are clasped in prayer, and he wears his full armour, which could mean that he's just returned from a battle. And above the knight, there is a stained glass window with the image of a woman holding a chalice. And this window symbolises a place of worship or sanctuary. And the knight's posture also suggests rest and contemplation, and his sword lies beneath the bed, signifying a temporary ceasefire from conflict. So this is a period of respite, recovery, and introspection. And the knight has withdrawn from the external world to find peace and rejuvenation. And this card can often mean a need to take a break, a rest, or a step away from ongoing challenges, especially after a period of intense activity or mental stress. And if you look at the card previous to this card, which is the Three of Swords, you'll see that this recuperation comes after a battle or heartache. So create a tranquil and meditative space for yourself, whether it's through physical rest, prayer, or quiet contemplation. You may be in a state of recovery or healing, both physically and mentally, from whatever went on with the Three of Swords. So use this time wisely to regain your strength and prepare for those challenges that lie ahead. The stained glass window with the chalice could suggest the presence of divine guidance or a higher power that you can turn to for inspiration and healing. And the Four of Swords is not about avoiding your responsibilities, but more about finding a balance and inner peace so that you can return to the world with renewed vigour and clarity. So, in summary, take a break from your daily struggles and prioritise self-care and recuperation. Taking a break from engaging in online conflicts with strangers, especially if you've recently experienced a breakup, is essential because it's the perfect time to pause, reflect, and focus on healing. And it's a common tendency for people to transition quickly from one relationship to another without allowing themselves the necessary time to grieve and mend their hearts. And skipping this crucial phase can potentially burden future relationships with unresolved emotional baggage. And if you've experienced a job loss, it's an opportunity to reflect on the circumstances that led to it and how to prevent a similar situation in the future. While the job loss may ultimately lead to a better path, it's still crucial to take a break for rest and recovery. And this time allows you to clear your mind of past resentments and gain the clarity needed for any future endeavours and opportunities.
While all of that is true, and I agree with that, and on the surface it seems like a tranquil, respite, almost monkish kind of card, it also is a card of death. It's a tomb, and he's a dead knight. Now this would be on the negative, so this is probably the real death card of the tarot. People talk with the death card, and literally with the Grim Reaper guy on it or whatever, but that's about recycling and restoration of things. This is repose. This is lying in state. This is the knight now who's dead. He didn't succeed. He died in battle. He fell in battle. I think there's a strong kind of, the fallen kind of vibe to this card. Now, the chalice in the window, to me, I've always seen that as he was on a grail quest and he didn't make it. He didn't come back with the grail. So his death wasn't meaningless. It was a heroic end, and we should contemplate the end. Now, that could be like in symbolic death, like a relationship ends or something like that. And you say, well, I gave it the best shot, but now it's time to withdraw from the world. Or like I said, lost a job. But it could also be someone who died in battle, trying to fight something. And the grail on the stained glass reminds us that it was an honorable life and an honorable death. And his sacrifice and his honor is immortalized in stone. So, it's a very card that can be read male and female ways, I think. And it is, I made a funny video, but it was very serious in its own way too, about my tarot philosophy. And that was one of the cards I picked up. And I went, he's dead. He's dead. He's in repose. There's a tomb, but it's true. So it's one of the most, of the Rider-Waite cards, one of the most deepest of the cards. A highly underrated card, I have to say. People wince when they see the Three of Hearts or the Death card or the Tower card, but they look at that and they go, that's interesting. But there's a tremendous amount of fatalism built into that imagery and into that card's symbolism. So it could be rest, but it could also be repose. But yeah, a fabulous card. One of those cards that kind of makes you fascinated by the tarot.
Yes, and it's many layers.
Big time, yeah. Good night, everybody.
Good night, and see you next week.